Hello everyone and welcome back to Destiny. Subclasses of Light 3.0 have been incredibly fun to play with, and today I want to dive a little bit deeper into one of my favorite builds in the game right now. I use this build pretty much everywhere. It's amazing in just about any legend or master content, perfect for those lost sector farming sessions and even raids. This build is perfect for ad clear, as you'll see, and it's one of the highest single target DPS supers in the game as well, so kind of the best of both worlds, super versatile, very fun to play, so let's get into it. So if the thumbnail hasn't given it away, this build is all about knives. One of the best parts of Subclass 3.0 were Bungie's verbs, which in RPG talk is essentially status effects or collection of buffs and debuffs. These define the capabilities of each of these subclasses, and the best part is that there is a handful of legendary and exotic equipment that utilizes these matching verbs. And for Solar, those verbs are Scorch, Ignite, Radiant, Cure, and Restoration. And of course, this build is going to be using all of them in a satisfying symphony of fire and ash. For this build, you're going to start with your Gunslinger Hunter, equipped with Gambler's Dodge, Proximity Knife, and Healing Grenade. As you'll see, Cure is one of the things this subclass doesn't do super well, something I hope they address in future aspects and fragments, but for now I just toss on the trusty Healing Grenade now that we have access to it. You will be doing so much damage with your knives that I promise you will not miss your grenade damage in the least, but you can put one on if you find healing grenades aren't necessary. Alright, let's go ahead and jump into the aspects that we're going to be using as the foundation for this build, starting with Knock 'em Down. This enhances your supers, including giving your Blade Barrage more projectiles, which of course will do more damage. But the real magic of this aspect comes with its second effect, which is while Radiant, final blows with your knife fully refund your melee energy. And this is going to be huge because you're going to get your knife back immediately, allowing you to throw a ton of knives, assuming you continue to get those knife kills, something that's going to be a lot more easier to achieve with Caliban's hand, and we'll look at that in just a moment. But moving on to the next aspect, we have Gunpowder Gamble. Now this is something that I've ignored in the past because I really wanted the 2 additional fragment slots you can get with the On Your Mark aspect. However, Gunpowder Gamble is just so incredibly powerful and so incredibly useful in this build, as you're about to see, that you really can't go without it. I highly recommend it, and of course that's going to let you charge up that improvised explosive that you can shoot out of the air and causes an ignition. Ignition, one of those verbs, going to be very important here in this build. And speaking of which, instead of going into the fragments, let's hop over to Caliban's hand, that exotic gauntlet for the hunter, which is really going to make this build sing. The exotic perk is Roast Him, which is what sets off this build because those proximity knives don't actually have any intrinsic scorching or ignition ability, and this kind of fixes that. So this ignites enemies on final blows with those knives, which is insane because ignitions are not the hardest thing to pull off, but are very powerful, and it's amazing that you can get an ignition with every single knife kill. And if it doesn't kill them, it leaves them scorched, which does a lot of damage and of course plays into the rest of this build. Also, the increased melee regeneration is pretty amazing. Your knife will almost be fully refunded by the time your knife explodes on its own. Great for trapping spawns. This is an incredible exotic, and I honestly can't believe how good it is and how well it plays into this build. So with our knife equipped with Scorch and Ignite, let's buff these aspects with some well-matching fragments, starting with Ember of Torches. This is a must not only for being Radiant, which is amazing, but also it will make you instantly proc the Throwing Knife refund for Knock 'em Down. Next is Ember of Eruption, which increases the area of effect for your ignitions. This is kind of important because you're going to be causing a lot of ignitions, and so you're going to be doing a lot of damage by increasing the area of effect. And we're going to be taking advantage of that increased area of effect with Ember of Char. Your solar ignitions spread Scorch to affected targets. If you are familiar with Void 3.0 volatile builds, this might sound kind of familiar. The gameplay loop starts with you killing your first target with the knife. For this, rank and file works best to ensure the kill, Now you are radiant with your knife back, and the enemy you killed has just ignited, spreading Scorch to anything nearby. We can finish them up with another knife, causing them to ignite, spreading Scorch even further, so on and so forth. And because of the size and frequency of these explosions, you're going to have a lot of collateral damage, which is super satisfying to watch. And of course, don't sleep on Gunpowder Gamble. It is incredibly powerful, and you're going to be filling it up really fast with all of these solar ignitions. Now, on its own, this build is awesome, but of course, now we jump into the mods that make this build shine. Excuse my stats here, I'm working on a triple 100 build with mobility, resilience, and discipline, but you can see I have a ways to go. A better Caliban's hand would be great, but I digress. Starting with an Arc Helm, we have some useful stuff. First up, we have Hands On. Melee kills grant super energy. This is free super. You're going to be using so many knives that it's going to build your super up insanely fast. You can even double up on this if you want, but I chose to go with Harmonic Siphon for Orbs of Power, which we'll play into a little later. And then finally, we can cap it off with Seeking Wells, which is going to be really useful when you're running around in all the crazy action, or if you're in harder content and don't want to run out to get your well. And yes, as you may have guessed it, this is going to be a pretty intense well build focused on melee kills. Next, we have Stasis Arms. I usually have these as stasis so I can have access to grenade or melee kickstart, but this season we have a 1 energy focusing strike, and that's going to let me get my dodge back since my mobility is so low right now. We'll finish off these gauntlets with a melee well maker. That's going to produce 1 solar well, and we can make that 2 solar wells with bountiful wells on our solar chest piece, which is exactly what we're going to do. This allows you to stack multiples of the same mod, which we are going to be doing, but since it takes up a whole slot in itself, Bountiful Well actually gives you 1 extra well for any of the well makers that you have on, even if you have a variety of them, which can be really useful for other builds. Aside from that, I personally use this for damage resist, but of course you can put on a reserve mod if you need it. Moving on to our solar legs, we have another melee well maker, taking our total to 3 wells produced from every knife kill, which you will have many of. After that, I recommend Recuperation, and of course that does proc from the orbs you generate yourself, giving you a little bit of health. I tend to run a solar primary with this build anyway, so it's just nice to have, but you can replace this with really anything else you need. I always use Cure Grenades as my first go-to for healing, so this is just really extra. Finally, we have the class item. You can really do whatever you want here that works with your setup. If you are running weapons that are matching your subclass element, I highly recommend Font of Might. It is fantastic, especially since I run a solar energy primary, and the one I have absolutely fallen in love with is the Amit AR2. This weapon is craftable. As you can see, I am working on leveling mine up and saving enough materials to be able to upgrade the perks, but one perk I highly recommend as soon as you can craft it is Incandescent. You'll probably find one dropping with Incandescent. It's not a hard perk to get on this gun, but you can also enhance it if you craft it yourself with things like Well-Rounded, which is going to help you, of course. You're going to be getting a lot of knife kills, and that's going to just be free stats for your weapon. I absolutely love this weapon in conjunction with this build. I honestly have not had as much fun with a build as this one yet, even in comparison to the Storm Grenade Titan that's been crazy this season. But for now, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, a like and a subscribe is always appreciated, and I will see you next time.